lest we forget how lucky we are to live in this age right now. My name is Charles Kelly, and I want to talk to you today about why we need to remember the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, 100 years ago. Tomorrow, or Remembrance Sunday, will mark exactly 100 years since the end of the First World War on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. Millions of people all over the world will attend parades and services to pay their respects to the fallen. Many of the younger generation might be wondering why we are still remembering a war from 100 years ago. Well, good question. But I think it's important to remember, and let me tell you why. Firstly, many of our own ancestors were touched or were among the estimated 40 million people who lost their lives during the so-called Great War, which ran from 1914 to 1918. Now, they're not just British soldiers and civilians, but civilians and volunteers and nurses, as well as military personnel from all over the world, including many Commonwealth countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, Africa, Caribbean countries, America, Irish, and of course many of the countries from our European neighbours. I apologise if I've left anybody out, but there are just too many to mention. It was the first global war, but unfortunately not the last, because we did not learn from our mistakes. So on Remembrance Sunday, we remember the dead and wounded from conflicts, not just those conflicts, but from all conflicts and even recent conflicts. And we used the poppy flower, which grew in the battlefields, and this is a symbol of it here. This is a make-up poppy flower, which grew in the battlefields of France on the Western Front. And we use this as a symbol of our respect for those people who lost their lives to serve their country. Or in some cases, they came from a country far away to serve and preserve our freedom. Some of these people were as young as 12, fighting an army on the Western Front. Yes, 12. The youngest authenticated British soldier in the First World War was 12-year-old Sidney Lewis, who fought in the Battle of the Somme in 1916. You know, whatever you think about the senseless nature of war, the soldiers who fought and laid down their lives serving their country or a cause were following orders. And I think they deserve our respect and should never be forgotten. Secondly, these occasions help us to learn from our past mistakes, and organisations like the United Nations and NATO have kept relative peace in Europe since the end of the Second World War, which caused over 50 million deaths. The next global war, if God forbid we should have one, will not be fought with rifles and tanks, and it will probably be our last. Thirdly, we should be grateful that most of us have grown up in this country and have never been called up or conscripted to go to war, and we've never had to witness the horrors of the battlefield firsthand. Indeed, we've never had to watch our sons or our grandchildren being called up by the government to go to a war, whether they liked it or not. I've never had to fight or kill another man in a uniform different to mine. Yes, the regular army have fought many conflicts since 1945, and we honour those this weekend. But we should be grateful and thankful to have enjoyed relative peace in our time. We should be grateful that we live in a democracy where we have rule of law, the right to vote, free healthcare from the NHS, free education, job opportunities, a safety net and benefits to help the sick and unemployed when we fall down sometimes, clean water, electricity, public transport and infrastructure that works, freedom of speech, freedom to worship whichever God we want to or not. I could go on and on about the benefits and freedoms we enjoy in the United Kingdom. We often complain about our country, don't we? And the media spend most of its time running the country down, unfortunately. But for all its faults, it's still a great place to live, and compared to many millions of people around the world who don't even have enough clean water or food in their belly, the average person in the UK and the West is rich beyond their dreams. We can't blame poor people from wanting to migrate to rich countries, as my parents did before I was fortunate enough to be born in the UK. I mean, how lucky is that? How What a twist of fate to be born here and have a British passport and all the freedoms I enjoy here, as opposed to being born in a country where I would have none of those benefits. You also should remember that the standard of living we enjoy in this country today is far different from those people who lived here 100 years ago. They didn't have the basic things that we take for granted now. And when we complain and about having to wait to see a doctor, or the fact that a train is a few minutes late, we should remember what it was like back 100 years ago. Most people worked in servitude. They didn't have free healthcare. Most of them didn't have the right to vote. Now, most of us now enjoy the benefits of freedom which we ourselves have not even really built. We drive on the roads and use airports and ride on trains and buses that were built by others before us. Yeah, okay, we pay our taxes, but in reality, our tax will not really cover the cost of running the country today, let alone building all of that infrastructure that we enjoy. In fact, the tax the average person pays will not cover the cost of what they get out of the system by the time they've gone through to retirement. Yeah, we talk about troubled times now, don't we? But they were far worse in the past. At that time of the First World War, as if it wasn't enough for people to have gone through a world war, the people of this planet were almost wiped out by a terrible killer disease. What was that disease? Flu. Just after the war had ended, the so-called Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, the deadliest in history, infected an estimated 500 million people worldwide and killed an estimated 20 to 50 million victims, possibly even more than during the war. How close that we came to just wiping ourselves out with just a disease called flu. Look, we now live in the most prosperous and healthy age in 7,000 years of recorded history. Forget about the good old days. There's never been a better time to live than now, and we are lucky to live in this age. So let's have some gratitude in our attitude. There's so many opportunities out there, let's go and grab them. A final thought. When it was decided by sitting around the table, as all wars are ended, that fighting would end at 11 o'clock on the 11th of November 1918, orders were dispatched during the hour preceding the appointed end of war time to all units, ordering them to cease fighting at 11 o'clock. Despite the fact that everyone knew the war was ending, in some cases within 30 minutes of receiving these orders, fighting still continued and people senselessly lost their lives. It is said that the last man to die in the First World War was a Canadian who was shot in the final minute before the war ended. I mean, how tragic is that? Then, at the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the guns fell silent. 4 years of fighting and the destruction of millions of lives had suddenly come to an end. This is what we remember, not the glory of war or the destruction of our enemies. For many years I didn't understand the significance of Remembrance Sunday parades. Like a lot of people I see today who watch the parade from the sidelines and feel they're not really part of it, I had no idea what it was all about. It was not until later in life I got involved in community work and charities such as the Rotary Club and local politics, eventually becoming mayor of the town, that I started to become directly involved with these parades, laying poppy wreaths and raising money for the Royal British Legion, which still helps veterans of all recent conflicts. The money raised from the sale of these poppy funds the good work of the British Legion. So if you see someone rattling the tin asking for money for a poppy that you pin onto your jacket, or you can buy these other ones, the metal ones, do put something in. It's not for sale. It's a voluntary contribution. It could be a few pence. It could be a few pounds. Whatever it is, do contribute, because all these people are volunteers as well. They spend a year preparing for this day. So to do give, and so we can remember those people. Now I hope that this Sunday you will attend a Remembrance Sunday parade near your home. Most towns have monuments on which are written the names of the dead people from that area. So there should be a parade somewhere near you. There will be a parade organised by the Royal British Legion starting at around about 10:20 to 10:30, and they generally walk to the the monument, and then there's usually a church service afterwards, and prayers will be said, and there's all denominations there, it's not just Christians, will be said to remember the dead. Now it's traditional that a verse from a poem by an English poet called Lawrence Binyon, called For the Fallen, is read out at the service. I'll read a little bit for you now. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.